Hi, everyone. I'm Emily from Artemisia Academy, and today we have Mary Andrews of our Holistic Gardener course talking about her experience as a homesteader and gardener. So, Mary, hi, thanks for coming. How are you doing today?
I'm doing great, thanks.
uh, why did you become a homesteader? Tell us a little bit about your background and journey in becoming a homesteader.
So I obtained a degree in ornamental horticulture years ago at Cal Poly, and the focus of that degree was really growing flowers. And when I started my own garden, I realized I really wanted to start growing food. And so the evolution of the property that I originally gardened on, the first home my husband and I were in, was a 1904 house. And it turned out that the soil was somewhat polluted. And so growing organic vegetables on polluted soil is sort of a bad idea. We had the fortune of being able to buy 12 acres in 2004. And the first thing we did was put up a deer fence before we built anything, before we built a house. It was raw land before we hooked up the water system even. And I started planting an orchard. I was really wanting to plant some apple trees. I've always had a love for apples, and where we were able to purchase the raw land is in an apple growing area. So I'm so excited. So before we even had the water hooked up, I was planting apple trees, and I was hauling water out in a big like 50-gallon tank from town in the back of the truck just to water my fruit trees. And then I started planting a hedgerow because I wanted some privacy. When we first purchased our property, it was all cattle fields around us. And then shortly thereafter, people started building right next to us, and they built what we call the La Quinta Inn. It looks like a Motel 6 to me. And so I started building a hedgerow of native plants. And then I started learning about hedgerows and their benefits for attracting beneficial insects, and how that can really help you reduce your bad insect populations on your fruit trees. So it sort of evolved from there.
So when you first started out, though, like you bought this property and you started building it up. Before you even bought it, what was kind of the background dream of having property? Like, why did you even want to start doing this?
Well, because I always ran out of room in my garden in town. I worked as a sales rep for a perennial nursery for a while, and I got to bring home my samples. And I ran out of places to plant plants. I didn't have a pocket anywhere, and I had pots full of plants, and I just didn't have enough room. I wanted a bigger garden. I had this dream of having 40 acres was my dream, and thank God I didn't. My husband has a lot more sense than I do. I grew up in a pretty urban environment. He grew up on a farm, and so he said, okay, we're going to fence off 2 acres. That's your garden. Very sensible. And honestly, the 2 acres I have a hard time maintaining as a single person out there. My husband helps out too, but the garden is mostly my responsibility. But thank God that I didn't get 40 acres and try and plant 40 acres of trees and vines and things. That's a bit ridiculous. And really, I didn't want to go into commercial agriculture. I just wanted to grow enough fruit for myself and my friends, and then nuts and things like that. Before I planted my fruit trees, I did call the local food bank to see if they would take fresh fruit if I ended up with extra fruit. And they will. They'll happily take fresh fruit. And there's even an association now in San Luis Obispo that will come out, bring a bunch of volunteers, and they will pick your trees dry of fruit if you have an abundance of fruit to then donate to the homeless shelter.
That's so awesome. So I really always love hearing your story of how this long journey happened. You've been on your land now for 15 years, is that right?
Actually, a bit over that. 2004 was when we purchased the property, and it's 2022. So I think that's 16. No, wait, I can do the math. Can I do the math? 6. Oh my gosh, I can't do the math today.
That's okay. 16, 17, 18 years. You're getting up there.
Thank you. Thank you.
And so
I'm getting up there.
Your land's getting up there too. And I just want to say I feel so fortunate that I've gotten to go to your property in person and see, that you took what used to be just a cow pasture and turned into there's 150 fruit trees. Is that right?
150 fruit and nut trees. I've got
And nut
5 walnuts and 20 olive trees, and I have an almond orchard now. So I've got about, I don't know, 12 to 15 almond trees. And then I have some hazelnuts. And so I probably have over 150 at this point. I sort of stopped counting, although I have mapped it all. So I could tell you an exact number, but roughly 150. So not all fruit. I couldn't eat that much fruit in a million years, but fruit and nut trees. Yeah.
Then you also have a pretty epic garden. And so I remember walking around part of your house and having seeing an asparagus patch on one side, having the big veggie garden in front of your house. And then there's like alder groves and redwood groves and all these beautiful things that you've planted that it still astounds me that you planted all of it. And it's only been in the last 20 years that this has been established. Can you tell me a little bit about how that bigger vision kind of unfolded and the journey that it took to get to where you guys are at now?
Well, I was fortunate to visit gardens in England back, I want to say 15 years ago now, and that was a huge inspiration. You can see the catmint walk behind me in this picture. That was a direct design steal from a garden I visited in England, Tinton Hall. Absolutely beautiful, and the beneficial insects absolutely love it. I wish I could say that I designed the whole thing to begin with, but what I've really done is I've tried to use the zone system where things that need the most amount of care are closest to the house. And then as you move out, for instance, the olive orchard is way out in the back 40, we call it, although it's not back 40, it's the back 1, but 1 acre, not back 40 acres, because the olives just don't really need that much care. And so infrequent visiting is fine. So other than really having the zone plan where I'm planting things, in zone 1 that need the most care that I see daily, and then out from there, I really didn't do an overall design. And honestly, I put in 25 rose plants this year, and I was trying to figure out where the hell, I was so obsessed with roses this fall, and I ordered a bunch of roses, and it's like, where am I going to put these? Well, I know they need constant care, so I have to go in zone 1. So I need to find a pocket somewhere for each of these. I ended up giving my neighbor about 5 of them because I just couldn't even plant all the ones I had ordered. But and I definitely go through cyclical things. I'm a very seasonal person. In the spring, I just go crazy for flowers, and I can't get enough. And I order flower seeds, and I start flowering plants. And then in the fall, I really have this urge to squirrel away food. And so that's when I get all excited and order more fruit and nut trees. And then they come and I think, oh, what have I done? Where am I going to plant this? But yeah, I definitely have a bit of an obsessive personality where I get focused on one thing. And then I do all this research. What variety of raspberries should I plant? Well, I can't just plant one variety. I have to trial 5 different varieties and see which will do the best. It's the scientist and the obsessive person in me. So yes, I've got a raspberry patch, an asparagus patch, love asparagus. That was one of my biggest learning curves. I knew I really wanted an asparagus patch, and I have excellent soil for asparagus out where my olive trees are now. And so I tried planting asparagus out there. And between the gophers and not getting irrigated enough the few years, I lost 2 crops. I planted one and I lost it. And I thought, oh, okay, I'm going to put it in gopher wire. I planted another crop of asparagus in gopher wire. I just didn't get out there enough to irrigate it and to weed it. And I realized, yeah, asparagus for me cannot go in zone 5, even though the soil out there is this perfect sandy loam that asparagus loves. I need to put it in zone 1 where I have heavier clay soil. I'm just gonna have to amend the soil there. And asparagus it's pretty tolerant of soil types, especially if you introduce lots of organic matter. So I have a fantastic asparagus crop now in zone 1 that I keep watered, that I keep the gophers out of. So that was a real lesson for me, and really drove home the point. I studied permaculture when I was an exchange student in Australia back in 1990 and 1991. I took a course from Dave Holmgren, one of the fathers, along with Bill Molson, of permaculture. And so that's where I got the idea of this zone planting. I'm not a permaculturalist as such. I don't follow all their rules. I do like their ethics, and but I take everything they say with a bit of a grain of salt, and I put a scientific spin on it, and I really analyze it. Like, does this really work? Do daffodils really keep gophers away from fruit trees? I thought maybe that was true. I couldn't see any scientific evidence of it, but I thought it was worth trying. I planted daffodils around every fruit tree I planted the first time I planted fruit trees. And I'll tell you, daffodils, in my experience, do not keep gophers away from fruit trees. They're very pretty. I like my daffodils, lovely daffodils in the spring. I'm not sad that I planted them, but you have to take the things that people say with a grain of salt. So, but the zone planting really has worked out well for me when I follow it.
Well, if you look back on your last few years, now that you're giving a few different examples, what are some things that you wish you could have done differently? How would you change things if you could go back in time?
I think one of the biggest things, especially when we're talking about planting trees, I would never plant another fruit tree without tasting the fruit, because when I have a friend from college that owns Trees of Antiquity Nursery. And so I thought, I want to plant all these antique varieties of apples. This is so cool. Antique apples, yay. And so my first planting of apples was all antique varieties. And I will say there's some fantastic antique varieties. There's definitely some varieties that I don't love. So I have over time replaced some of them. But when you're talking about a tree, it's first of all a financial investment to purchase a tree, and second of all a time investment before you get to even taste the fruit. And so I think that would be, especially if you are only planting a few fruit trees, make sure you like the variety. That's pretty essential. I've grafted over several apple trees with varieties that I do like. So that's really important. Plant and plant what you like to eat. Don't plant 50 zucchini plants if you're only going to eat the zucchinis from one plant. I think people get a little overzealous. I was lucky. I learned from a good friend of mine that put in a huge vegetable garden the first year she moved on to a property. And after, a couple, month or so into it, she was so overwhelmed with keeping it watered and keeping it weeded that she just gave up on the whole thing. And so I think that I was lucky to learn from her that you just take it in steps. You do one area at a time, and you don't overwhelm yourself with a huge amount of planting. You just go slowly. I also have a fruit tree variety, the Seckel fruit tree, which people love that pear. And I will tell you, it is way too sweet for me. I do not like Seckel pears, but I've got this beautiful Seckel pear tree that produces wonderfully. And I'm not going to pull it out. My friends like it, but definitely tasting the fruit varieties and the vegetable varieties also before you go. I would also say that I probably would never plant calendula if I had to do it over again. It's sort of a rampant weed in my garden. It's a beautiful flower, and I have very mixed feelings about it, but that's something to consider. Also, milkweed. Cheeseweed, Malva, not milkweed, cheeseweed. I watched a permaculture video where this woman said, "Oh, I love my cheeseweed. I mow it down, and it's great for mining. It's what's called a dynamic accumulator. So it will go down into the soil and pull up nutrients, and then you mow it, and it makes a lovely mulch." And I brought in some free horse manure, and it happened to have cheeseweed, and so I let it go to seed. And that was the biggest mistake I ever made, because now cheeseweed is everywhere, and I spend a lot of time trying to eradicate it. So I think if you can keep the weeds out, then you should. And when they call something a weed, you really need to understand, like, why are they calling that a weed? It might be edible. It might have a root that can be used for herbal medicine, but it is very aggressive reseeder. And so those are definite things. If I could turn the clock back, I would certainly not allow cheeseweed, and maybe not allow calendula in my garden.
Well, I really appreciate hearing all these learning lessons from you. And that's definitely one of the reasons why I wanted to co-create this course with you, the Holistic Gardener course. For those who are interested, our Holistic Gardener course is coming up this next Thursday, March 3rd. And we're going to be offering a 12-week course on how to create your own holistic garden without wasting your energy, effort, and time. And so Mary here has definitely done the time and energy and the research over the years to tell us what works, what doesn't work, and how to go forward with your own holistic garden plan without making the same mistakes. So thank you very much, Mary, for joining us today. And we'll be talking with you again later this week and asking about a little bit more information about the course. So thanks so much. Bye,
Thanks,
guys.
Emily. Bye.